Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In the early hours of Wednesday, India struck 9 sites in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, targeting the terrorist infrastructure there, including the headquarters of Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba as part of Operation Sindoor. The strike came 2 weeks after the Pahalgam terror attack, in which 26 people were killed. This retaliation by India was the most expansive and widespread since the Balakot airstrikes in 2019 and the surgical strikes following the Uri attack in 2016. Now, hours after these terrorist infrastructures were targeted, there was a sharp escalation in cross-border shelling by Pakistani forces, which killed at least 9 civilians and injured 38 others in Jammu and Kashmir. We are dedicating today's episode to discussing the details of this operation, Pakistan's response, and the nationwide mock drills conducted yesterday as part of the government's efforts to train civilians to protect themselves in the event of a hostile attack. And for this, we begin by speaking to the Indian Express's diplomatic affairs editor Shubhajit Roy about Operation Sindoor. Shubhajit, talk about when exactly did this operation take place and what were the sites which were targeted?
So we got to know at 1:44 a.m. on Wednesday, which is basically in the wee hours, in the early hours of Wednesday, when the Defense Ministry put out a statement that 9 terrorist sites have been targeted by the Indian Armed Forces. Later in the morning, Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri and 2 Armed Forces officers, women officers, they briefed and they said that the operation took place between 1:05 a.m. and 1:30 a.m. And they targeted 9 sites, of which 5 terror sites are in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Of these 5, 2 each are in Muzaffarabad and Kotli, and another one is in Bhimber. And the remaining 4 out of the 9 sites are in Pakistan, basically the mainland Pakistan, of which 2 are in Sialkot, 1 each in Muridke and in Bahawalpur.
And we understand that these are home bases for some of the biggest terror outfits in Pakistan, especially Muridke and Bahawalpur. Tell us what all we know about them.
So, Muridke is the headquarter of the Lashkar-e-Taiba, which has sort of conducted many terrorist attacks, including the infamous 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks of 2008, amongst others. Similarly, Jaish-e-Mohammed has their headquarter base is also in Bahawalpur, which was also targeted. And Jaish-e-Mohammed, as you know, was sort of infamous terror attack was the one on Parliament, Parliament attack in December 2001. And since then, there have been a lot of terror attacks, Pulwama and Uri and Pathankot. So they've all some have had direct links with Lashkar-e-Taiba, some have had Jaish-e-Mohammed. But the current terror attack in Pahalgam, which took place on 22nd April, in which 26 civilians were killed, that has been linked to Lashkar-e-Taiba, which is headed by terrorist leader Hafiz Saeed.
Right, and Shubhajit, you mentioned, the briefing which was done by Vikram Misri and 2 women officers of the army. And they were relatively unknown faces in that sense. One was Commander Vyomika Singh and the other was Colonel Sophia Qureshi. Talk a bit more about this briefing and what were the things that stood out to you in their statements?
You very rightly pointed out how the Indian government fielded 2 women officers. And they held the briefing giving out the operational details of these strikes. And it becomes important because the operation is also named Operation Sindoor. And if anyone who's familiar with sort of Indian culture, that Sindoor signifies married women. And in this case, where the victims were all Hindu, most of them were Hindu men, except for 1 or 2. And they were targeted. So it was a very symbolic sort of a name that was given. So A briefing done by two women officers is a very symbolic gesture by the Indian government.
ऑपरेशन सिंदूर 22 अप्रैल को पहलगाम में हुए विभत्स आतंकवादी हमले के शिकार मासूम नागरिकों व उनके परिवारों को न्याय देने के लिए लॉन्च किया गया था। इस कार्रवाई में 9 टेररिस्ट कैंप्स को टारगेट किया गया और पूरी तरह से इसे बर्बाद किया गया। पाकिस्तान में
In the briefing, what I found interesting was, apart from obviously the details that one saw of the strikes that were in, what stood out to me was the fact that unlike in 2019, when the Balakot aerial strike had taken place, and there were no pictures of or videos of the aerial strike, this time they had documented video footage and which were broadcast at that time while they were briefing the media.
And Shubhajit, what is the significance of that? What is the significance of them putting out these details?
So essentially, it is to establish the fact that retribution has been done and justice has been done for the families who have suffered this terrorist attack, and also to the country that Indian armed forces took this measured, proportionate, but at the same time a pretty risky operation. But it had proof, it had evidence that it had actually done so. And it presents a convincing case to everyone that the Indian armed forces, when it said that it had conducted strikes, it had photographic and videographic evidence to prove that. So I think from that lens, from that perspective, it is a very important element of this press conference, which was, to me, stood out the most.
And the other thing that was pointed out during this meeting was that India chose not to target any military locations.
The strike on the terror camps were undertaken through precision capability, as shown to you. A niche technology weapons with careful selection of warheads was ensured so that there will be no collateral damage. The point of impact in each of the target was a specific building or a group of buildings. All the targets were neutralized with clinical efficiency, and the results reiterate the professionalism of the Indian Armed Forces in the planning and execution of their operations. No military establishments were targeted. India has demonstrated considerable restraint in its response. However, it must be said that the Indian Armed Forces are fully prepared to respond to Pakistani misadventures, if any, that will escalate this situation. Jai Hind, and thank you very much.
Shubhajit, could you talk about the importance of not doing that, of not targeting military locations, and also the importance of pointing that out?
Yeah, I think it is the most fundamental and important point that the Indian government and Indian armed forces were making, that India, while civilians in India were targeted by Pakistani terrorist groups, India had no intention to target Pakistani civilians or Pakistani economic centers, firstly. And the military was also not targeted, because once you target or attack a military installation, it automatically challenges the authority of the Pakistani military. And that would mean that you're inviting a response, a retaliation from the Pakistani military. In this case, it was made very clear, especially this has been done not just for Pakistan, but also for the global community, that it has not attacked Pakistan's military, but it has gone after Pakistan terror camps. You can always argue that these Pakistan terror camps or Pakistan terror groups have a dotted line, or sometimes some would say a very active support from the Pakistan military. But at this point, Indian government, Indian armed forces attacked Pakistan's terror infrastructure and not Pakistan's military.
And Shubhajit, what has been Pakistan's reaction? What all has it said about these strikes so far?
So Pakistan has obviously been very negative. It views it as a threat to its territorial integrity, sovereignty. The Pakistan military has also briefed about, the casualties. In fact, Pakistan military has accepted at least 26 people have been killed which is a rare admission. There was no such admission in the case of Balakot, for example, in 2019. And that is how it is different again this time from 2019.
Right, so we have photographic evidence from India and we have Pakistan confirming the casualties.
Correct. And also Pakistan's army has also said that, Indian planes did not come inside Pakistan's territory. So which essentially again is different from previous time when they had said that Indian aircraft had crossed over and they had indulged in a dogfight, which is a sort of challenge with Pakistani planes. And we had seen what had happened back then when an Indian pilot sort of was captured and later released by Pakistan. So I think that is another difference I saw. And now we have seen a statement from the Pakistan's defense minister saying that if India does not respond or does not retaliate again, then Pakistan will also not. So essentially giving a signal of sorts that probably it is going to be a pause for the moment, but we cannot take this statement at its face value because knowing Pakistan military, how unpredictable it is, and there might be a situation where they might want to avenge or this particular strikes by India and 9 locations inside Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. So one should not be surprised if Pakistan takes retaliatory steps in terms of military action.
And right after the Pahalgam attack, India had been reaching out to its strategic partners for support and a bunch of them had even condemned the incident. What has been the global reaction to Operation Sindoor?
So the global reaction has been very, very different for different countries. So India reached out to the US, UK, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Russia in the first few hours. And then there were also phone calls with the French, German, and also the Chinese. And the Chinese have obviously said that it's regrettable, this action, Indian action. India has stood its ground, said that it is not an escalation, it was retaliation to the terror attack that took place in Pahalgam. With the Americans, there's been phone call between National Security Advisor Ajit Doval and US Secretary of State and NSA Marco Rubio. And US President Trump has sort of said that, he hopes this ends quickly. And then Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri has also briefed the international community in the last few hours. And the 13 members at the UN Security Council, including the non-permanent members. And there, again, he has sort of put forward the rationale behind this action, the links to Pakistan, links to Pakistan-based terror group like the Resistance Front and its links with Lashkar-e-Taiba, which is said to be behind the Pahalgam terror attack. And obviously there have been questions about why the escalation and what does it lead to. And the response has been it depends on how Pakistan reacts to today's developments.
And Shubhajit, the other thing that was reported in the early hours of Wednesday was that an unidentified aircraft had allegedly crashed in a village in Punjab, due to which a labourer from Haryana died and 9 others sustained burn injuries. Do we know anything yet about this crash?
There has been no official confirmation to these reports. I have also seen some of these reports, but which have talked about different kinds of equipment, different kinds of casualties. But as of now, we haven't had official confirmation from the Indian government or the Indian Armed Forces or the Indian Air Force in the last 12 to 15 hours.
And now moving on from the operation, we talk about Pakistan's response to it. Yesterday, 9 people and 38 others were injured in Jammu and Kashmir as Pakistan escalated cross-border shelling. Immediately after it, Chief Minister Omar Abdullah chaired an emergency meeting with deputy commissioners of all border districts to assess the situation. He later ordered the immediate release of 5 crore rupees each for border districts and 2 crore rupees each for other districts to help district collectors manage the situation and procure necessary resources. When we spoke to the Indian Express's Arun Sharma, he told us about the situation in the region.
The situation is grim so far as Poonch district is concerned. Though shelling took place in Rajouri district also, parts of Kashmir Valley also along the LOC. But Poonch town was the worst affected, where 10 civilians died and more than 40, you can say, were injured.
And Arun, we understand that, during this, artillery shelling was used. And for those who are not familiar, artillery shelling is this very heavy bombardment using large caliber guns that fire explosive shells. Is that usual for this region?
No, it is not usual. In the peace shelling, in the past also, when there used to be escalation along the borders, Pakistan used RT shelling along the LOC. But it was not so intense. And it has been first time after 1971 Indo-Pak War that Pakistani troops have used RT fire to target civilian population in Poonch town. 71 war, RT shells never fell in Punchstone. Though after 2019 Pulwama attack, when India carried out surgical strikes in Balakot, Pakistani troops, they resorted to rocket firing and RT shells, but they fell near Betar Nala, which falls on the outskirts of the city. Even in 2019, they did not fell in Punchstone. During Kargil conflict also, there was no shelling on Punchstone.
And talk about the kind of action the Jammu and Kashmir administration has taken so far.
They've already asked the administration to make arrangements at safer places in the event of people migrating from border areas in case shelling increases. This time, what has happened, shelling may not be taking place right along the LOC, but a little bit away from the LOC, like Punchstone. From Punchstone to LOC, there are many villages which are there, but main target was Punchstone. Similarly, in Mender, Mankot area was the main target of Pakistani troops, where one lady got killed and her daughter got injured. By and large, this RT fire has remained confined to Poonch and Rajouri district. It has not taken place today in Akhnur sector.
Yeah, and it has been over the years, right, that Poonch town has seen an increased attack by militants, because that was not the case earlier. Of course, now what's happening is Pakistan's military response.
Since long, there have been no militant attack in Punchstone, and Punchstone is hardly 8 to 10 kilometers away from the LOC. And I don't mean to say that shelling is not taking place areas falling between LOC and Punchstone, but main focus of Pakistani troops today was Punchstone, where a lot of houses got damaged, government buildings, offices got damaged, vehicles got damaged, and this led to panic among the local people, a large number of whom have moved to safer places like Surankot, Lasana, and other areas.
And Arun, give us a sense of how worried people seem right now about tensions escalating further. And, what has been the mood on the ground since even the Pahalgam terror attack?
Ever since there was a terror attack on tourists in Pahalgam, there was a general feeling among the people that something will take place. Something bigger will take place. It will be maybe bigger than Balakot strike. And people were already apprehending that in 1 or 2 days something is going to happen. So, going by the talk, with discussions which going on among the people, this strike has not come as a surprise to them. And accordingly, Pakistani response too has not shocked the people. Basically, in border areas, government had already constructed lot of bunkers. People too had their own bunkers. After Pahalgam's strike, they had started cleaning their bunkers and expediting the harvesting of their wheat crop as well. All these things show that they were preparing themselves for this kind of a situation.
And we've been talking about Poonch and the areas around it, but what is the situation like in other parts of the region?
Basically, this cross-border shelling, though it is going on in Rajouri, Poonch and some parts of Kashmir Valley, but people in other parts of Jammu region, say for example Khanur and the plains of Jammu province, Jammu, Samba and Kathua district which fall on international border, they to seem prepared to face such kind of eventuality. The government has already asked the administration to make arrangements in case they have to move people to safer places, in case of shelling or firing taking place there. And administration has already designated areas where people can stay. Arrangements for their boarding, lodging, food, etc. have been made by the administration. Everything is in a standby mode, even if this situation escalates.
Now, with the rising tensions between the two nations, people on both sides fear the situation could escalate into a full-blown war. And these anxieties were further heightened after the centre on Monday directed all states and union territories to conduct mock drills and strengthen civil defense mechanisms in preparation for a potential hostile attack. States and union territories were asked to activate air raid warning sirens, implement crash blackout measures in selected areas, and train civilians, including students, on safety protocols to follow during an aerial or ground assault. The first of these drills was conducted yesterday across 244 civil defense districts. We now speak to the Indian Express's Deeptiman Tiwary, who tells us the idea behind these drills and what they involve. Deeptiman, first tell us what exactly are civil defense districts?
Civil defense districts are basically demarcated areas which can be towns or entire districts or a city or a metropolitan city. They are demarcated as civil defense districts by Ministry of Home Affairs on the recommendations of the Ministry of Defense. Basically, the concept is a wartime preparation where you see the threat perception in a particular area. Typically, these areas could be border towns, villages, border districts. At the same time, important cities like, for example, in India, you could blindly say that Mumbai and Delhi would be a target. So they become cities where you would have a civil defense mechanism to deal with a wartime situation. At the same time, then you look at where are your vital installations and defense installations. So you have to ensure that wherever your nuclear facilities are stationed or where you have air bases, where you have military depots. So you look at those. Then you look at your critical infrastructure, your roads, your key highways, your railway lines. They do not get disrupted. Or if they get disrupted, how do you deal with the situation and how do you protect the lives of common citizens? And this cannot alone be done by your military. So that is why you take the participation of the society and you train them that this is how you need to protect yourself. You know, if there is a bombing, if there is an air raid, or if, there is a ground strike, there is a hostile attack, how do you protect? So you train your people and you first demarcate these districts and then you build certain civil defense infrastructure.
And by civil defense infrastructures, you mean?
So this could be your fire services, this could be your NCC cadets, you could have Nehru Yuva Kendra guys, or students. Are training facilities available in those areas? Are there air raid warning systems in place in those areas? In times of crisis, how are you going to ensure water supply? Like people who have been students during the time of 1971 war, they say that they were given training, that when the air raid siren, goes off, then you're supposed to get under your bed or under the table because there could be an air raid. And, so if the building falls, at least you will be able to save your life. So those are some of the drills that people go through and are trained in these designated districts.
And we understand that right now there are some 295 such districts. But tell us, as part of these mock drills, what all did we see on Wednesday?
So there were these, sudden power outages that were conducted in certain districts. Largely, we saw those kind of things in the border districts, such as in Punjab, Rajasthan, Jammu areas and all. Then there were these air raid sirens when vehicular traffic was completely stalled and passengers in their vehicles were, supposed to take some kind of precautionary measures or shelters. There were also evacuation drills which were conducted where people were made to hide in bunkers, leave their homes. Villages were evacuated and made to sit in bunkers or trenches. So those kind of drills essentially which were basically conducted apart from checking on your civil defense infrastructure, your power supply, your water supply, your fire services and other things.
Yeah, and a lot of these mock drills were also conducted in schools and hospitals, for example. But with the use of modern technology like thermal imaging and satellite imaging, are blackouts still useful?
So, the idea of a blackout is essentially that your important buildings, your vital installations, are not targeted. So, in that sense, blackout still sort of makes sense. One could still argue that, there is a GPS. It tells you where what is, and most weapons are, fitted with GPS. Nobody's looking down from a jet to figure out that this is the place. Like, for example, India has conducted its air strikes with pinpoint precision. It is obviously not done by eyeballing those targets. So, yes, that is an argument. But for civilian safety, these drills continue to be carried out.
And Deeptiman, after this operation was conducted, the Prime Minister and the Home Minister, they've had meetings and have briefed important stakeholders. Talk about what we know about the measures and even the concerns that are being thought of.
Naturally, the concern is about especially the border states, because amid a heightened tension between India and Pakistan, and India having carried out certain surgical strikes inside Pakistan, one would expect that Pakistan retaliate. Already, following the terror strikes, there has been heavy shelling by Pakistan at the LOC and the international border, and villages along the line of control and the international border have suffered, both in terms of human lives and damage to property. So these kind of attacks could be expected further. So obviously the focus of these meetings by the Prime Minister is on sensitizing the states on the security measures that they need to take to save civilian lives, especially in these border areas. And obviously these includes all the mock drills that the government is has suggested that must be carried out, all the civil defense measures that need to be taken, and sensitization of local police, civil defense workers, and any part of the society that can be engaged into protecting civilian lives is what is being done.
You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.